with Jeffery Straker, SCMA member, SCMA award winner. You're a nominee, I think, this year too, aren't you?
I am. I am for Keyboard Player of the Year.
Right. And we were just chit-chatting about that keyboard behind you. Fairly old keyboard. You were telling me it's 1910 it was made.
1910 Heinzmann, built in Toronto. So it's a Canadian-made vintage, old vintage beauty. And I love the sound of it. Yeah.
Do you play it often?
All the time. In fact, I just had it tuned by my tuner tech guy. Dennis came by and gave it a tune. My house is also a 1910 vintage, and although I love these old houses, they're not humidity nor temperature tight. So which is fine if you just want to turn up your furnace, but the problem is these things are really sensitive to humidity. So having an old piano in an old house means you have to tune it way more frequently than you would in an airtight house. Anyway, that's
I
probably more
bet.
piano nerdery than anyone wanted, but
How long does it take to tune that thing?
it takes an hour. Typically, I tend to talk and gossip with the technician a lot, so I probably impede his productivity. But it takes about an hour, and they start at the base and work their way to the top. If it's really out of tune, actually, they have to do it twice because by the time they get to the top, the bottom has gone slightly out of tune.
Oh, geez.
Of course, that costs you twice as much, and it's not just a money grab. It really is true. I mean, if you think of even a guitar, like if it's really out of tune, you start at the bottom, go to the top. You got to do it again. It's the same with the
Yeah.
piano.
Do you, I know you play piano and keyboards and all that sort of thing. To me, there's just sort of a different soul when it comes out of an actual piano than it does out of a keyboard trying to sound like a piano. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, 100%. And it's not just something we feel, it's true. And part of it is, well, probably most of it is, that though a digital piano, and I'm kind of a Yamaha digital piano guy, like, and they sample those Yamaha digital sounds off an actual Yamaha grand. So when you hit the key, it is indeed like a sampled recorded sound of a Yamaha Grand. So you get that, but what you don't get is the sympathetic vibrations of everything else in the
Hmm.
cabinetry and the wires and the steel. And that we feel it as like warmth or something. It's like vibration. And you can't get that as hard as they try out of a digital instrument that's trying to replicate it. So when you hear a real piano, you are indeed feeling something you are not feeling with the digital.
Maybe it's just me, and maybe you're the same way. You can feel it when you're listening to a recording, and you don't know how it was recorded, but you can feel whether or not it's real strings, real piano, as opposed to something electronic created.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My first memory of that, of realizing that was actually, like this is long ago, probably 20 years ago. There was a CBC national news story about maybe more than 20 years ago. And it was about synthesizers replacing studio musicians to play string parts in studios in Toronto. And they did a side by side with real string players and synthesized string players. And when you side by side it, like it's like night and day, you know? But the problem is, the problem is the reality, which is listeners have just got so used to string pads off a synthesizer that most have no bass to compare it to. He
Yeah,
says,
man.
those kids, Tim, I tell you, they're ruining everything for us.
Well, I think every fan of music owes it to themselves to go see a performance that involves real strings, real percussion, real keyboards, the whole kit and caboodle, and then you'll probably notice a difference
Mhm.
from when you listen to something that's electronically created as opposed to something that somebody's actually really playing and feeling the soul of.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I had, and just not to, and a last comment on this, but I recently did a tour in March across Western Canada, playing in proper theaters with, and they all had proper grand pianos, except for one of the shows I had to use the digital. But like sitting down every night for all these concerts in a big hall with a grand piano. Oh my gosh! And they were all different, you know. They're all a grand piano, but like a Steinway versus a Yamaha versus a Fazioli versus a Bosendorfer, like they all have their own personality. So it was a real fantastic getting to kick those tires each night and trying out these pianos. But yeah, all real pianos, all with this massive glorious sound. I just loved it.
Hmm. That's cool. I like. We could probably talk about this forever, but but
But that's not why we're here.
that's not why we're here. I want to. Okay, you're from small town Saskatchewan, and before I don't even want to try and say the name because I know I'm going to screw it up because I'm not from small town. I'm from small town Alberta.
Yeah, I know. I read that about you. Yes.
Yeah. Uh, and when I say small town, I mean small town, like 200 people. What's the name of the town you're from?
Like, I actually really want you to try it.
Is it Punachie?
You're so close. Like, you're so close. It's Punashai.
Punashai, okay.
And it's debatable whether it's Punachai or Punashai, but you were really close. Back in the day when we used to have a local TV broadcast out of Yorkton, before it was part of CTV, like they had their own little Yorkton bubble of television that produced all their own shows, and they had their own news, morning, noon, and supper time. And you could tell whenever they had a new hire in the news department because they would say Punichi, which it is not, but it is indeed Punashai. And interestingly, for people who out there who don't know this, fun Saskatchewan trivia, it originates from a Cree word. It is a Cree word, and it means small featherless bird or small fledgling bird. And there's a historical reason why that name was given to the town as the word. But part of it was the CN Railway was coming through, and they were in this very uncreative mode of naming towns, and it's called the alphabet line because they literally named them from A to Z down the line. And so they got to this place that needed a P, and they're like, "We need a P, we need a P." And so anyway, there were a lot of First Nations people around there, and the word stuck. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And when I say small town, it's like 200 people. And when you hear somebody out of the United States say, "I grew up in a small town of 60,000 people," well, no, you didn't.
No. Yeah.
Maybe you grew up in a small town of 60,000 people, but you did not grow up in a small town.
Small town.
Everybody knows everybody, like literally knows everybody. And you grew up on a farm and did the whole farming thing and stuff. And explain your discovery of music. How did you find, especially classical piano? Like, how did you get into? Most people would think, oh, you grew up in a farm in Saskatchewan, you're going to play fiddle or guitar or something along those lines. But no, you're a classically trained pianist.
Yeah, and I mean, I would sort of propose that most people of my generation or the previous generation, or even some of them now living in rural Saskatchewan, have gotten into piano through classical piano because it's kind of one of the ways you tiptoe into it. There's more. Some are doing YouTube now, but I mean, in my era, my mom was a piano player. She was really good. She had up to like her grade 8, I think, and Dad played the banjo. But we had a piano in the house, and Mom wanted my brother and myself and my sister to be exposed to music. So when we were in grade 3 in school, each of us started piano lessons with a local teacher named Mrs. Young, and thank God for these small town piano teachers because they enabled the music education of an entire generation of kids across the country, And so Mrs. Young, I really took to her and to piano, simultaneously in equal amounts really fast. And I wanted to impress her. So I started to practice like lots off the hop. And, the 10,000 hour theory, the more you practice, the quicker and better you get. So I progressed kind of, not rapidly, but like, fairly quickly. And I really loved it. And so she handed me off to this teacher in the next town at a certain level, Mrs. McTavish, who then handed me off to a professor at the University of Regina Conservatory of Music when I was in grade 10 in school. And I did my last 3 years of piano at the U of R Conservatory while I was in high school. And I'd have to drive in once a week, but it was pretty cool. I mean, I probably really overdosed on it. Like I probably did more classical training than I actually needed, but I really liked it. So why not,
There's worse things that a high school kid could be involved in.
Exactly. Yeah. I probably did some of those things too, though.
Is Jeffrey really playing the piano? Oh my. So, one of the images that is conjured up in people's imaginations when they think of the prairies, especially growing up in the era that we did, every town had at least one of these, was a grain elevator. And I believe I think it's on your website this morning, your town had 5 at one point, right?
Yeah, it had 4. I think at one point I said 5, and then I redid my research, and it was 4. But they're all 4 right in a row along the CN, we were on the my little town's on the CN main line, so like four in a row. That some and you know, and I thought that was a lot. Someone commented because I have this song about elevators. Someone commented that she lives in Ontario now. She was originally from Fox Valley, Saskatchewan, and I still don't believe this, but she said they had eight. Like that just seems
8.
like that's incredible, you know. But yeah, Punashai had four.
I think my hometown, which was about 5 or 6 thousand people, depending upon the oil boom, had
Yeah,
about 4,
yeah,
and which is probably about standard.
I thought so.
But as time goes by, and I was actually talking to a farmer about this a couple of weeks ago, as time goes by, these large wooden structures that are, some of them are close to, if not beyond 100 years old,
Old.
um, have amalgamated into these large concrete things now that people take their supplies to, their grain to. And you have a song called "More Than Two by Four in Timbers," which is reflecting on those, not just those, but everything that's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. And not, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're just being nostalgic in there. And you know, times change, progress happens. We don't have party lines anymore. Rotary phones are kind of gone.
Yeah.
So explain the story behind where that came from, where the development of the story about the grain elevators came from for this particular song.
Well, I mean, probably. I mean, one thing that happened in the town where I'm originally from, the last of those four grain elevators was knocked down in 2019. And although this song isn't about that, it probably played into it. I mean, a bigger part of where this song about elevators came from, strangely, is actually due to my parents having both passed away in the last 5 years. So it's a really life changing for me and really, you know, horrible to deal with. But it's like unrelated specifically to them. What it's made me do is really ponder time and the notion of time and how precious time is and what's the best use of it. And, you know, things that have, you know, and so as I stopped to reflect, I looked at the town where I'm from and it's really fading. Like it's kind of hard to watch actually. Like there's some towns in Saskatchewan and you know the small towns, not just in Saskatchewan. I toured in England in 2022 and I'm going back this fall and I've learned it's the same in England with small towns. Like there are small towns that are simply becoming ghost towns before our very eyes, you know, the world over. My town is one of them. And so I got thinking about this place raised me up. This community, you know, my family and my mom and dad raised me up, but like this community raised me up and it was bustling and there was a cinema and a drugstore and a bank and three grocery stores and three gas stations. Like it had all the things. Like it had a movie theater. And now there's like nothing, you know? And it's really crazy. And when these elevators were built, they were like the first big thing, big tall thing. Well, there were things that were before them, you know, for all sorts of historical reasons. But when the elevator was built with the name of the town on the side, it was the first big thing proclaiming we are a community and we are here. Like it was like this monument saying like, check us out, we're here, and you could see it from miles away, and it kind of sort of signaled the agricultural boom and arrival of that place. And as they get knocked down, because these larger inland terminals, as you said, these concrete terminals are being built, it almost in a way symbolizes the decline of the small town. Like, so to
Mhm.
me, as just in the wake of my parents passing away, I'm see, you know, as I look, you know, sort of woefully across the prairies and see some of these elevators get knocked down. It's, you know, it's not like it's a bit of a longing for something that once was, but it's also I wrote the song in a way that it's also an acknowledgement of something that just is, you know, like
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a really long answer to a really short question, but that's kind of it.
Well, no, I think it's important to kind of understand that. I think there's a point in our lives, I think, where we kind of go, okay, it's time to think about things and the, you know, what every time I have left and the time that I've already had, what's really kind of important, what's of value to me. Because when you think about that, your town's an hour and a half away from Regina. Is that the biggest center? Or I guess it would, how close is it to Saskatoon?
But Saskatoon's further. Yorkton's probably a similar distance, but Regina's much bigger than Yorkton. Like Regina is the
Yeah.
biggest nearby city. Yeah.
So if you need anything or you want anything of any, you know, go to a movie or whatever the case may be, it might be as far as Regina.
Yeah.
Concerts and live events and things like that are
Yeah.
Regina or maybe
Yeah.
Saskatoon or Yorkton. But so the the soul of a small town is just kind of dwindling a little bit. And I think that song is significant of that, and not just to the small town, but life and, everything kind of surrounding it. It gives you an opportunity to kind of reflect on things that we've all gone through, and our kids are going to go through with their own current things that are going to be nostalgia in 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, and it was interesting. Like a couple things. I mean, because related to the song, like one of the things that when you write all these songs, then you go to make a record that song is on my next record. You start to, as a writer, you ask yourself like, okay, what songs of the batch that I've written will end up on this record? And so I started to test drive some of these at shows. I didn't sing them a lot, but I sang that one a couple times. And the first time I sang it, like if there were, I don't know, 100 people at the show, 100 people came up to the merch table and said, "How can I get that song?" And I was like, this is really interesting because like I thought it was kind of a niche idea, but I guess what in hearing people talk about it, although it was a song about a grain elevator, it was more of a song about simpler times
Mm.
and a bygone era, and you know, sort of a yeah, just like life has become. Although the world gets better and better all the time, like it gets life gets easier. There's something about the simplicity of it in our memory anyway that we all long for, and I think that's maybe what the song does, and it really quite a surprise how it struck people. So I was really happy to to put on the record for that reason.
Now you're also doing something really unique, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this whole thing. You are doing something called the Prairie Skyscraper Concert Series, where you're going to small towns that still have the Prairie Skyscraper or the grain elevators, and you're performing. Are you performing at the elevator?
I'm performing at or in
In.
some cases, at or in these elevators. Yeah, and there's seven communities that I am stopping in. And it's funny, like the song, the song kind of inspired the tour. 'Cause I mean, I mentioned off the top, like I just finished this a big Western Canada tour playing like really nice theaters with grand pianos and like it was a great tour. It was a double bill with this fella named Royal Wood, and that was just in March. And so this record coming up that this song is on, it's got a lot of prairie themes running through it. And I thought, I just did this big theater tour. What's a real prairie way I can launch this
Hmm.
record? And I was like, what about shows at crane elevators? It's a crazy idea. And because it's hard enough to plan a tour in like rooms that have a PA system. And I was like, I know, I'll do these shows in great elevators. And I was like, wait a second, some of these things don't even have power. Like it was like a real, the cart got way before the horse, like way before the horse. But anyway, the cat was out of the bag, and I was like, oh my god, I got to figure out how to do this. But luckily, in a lot of these communities, like there's a group that has sort of attached themselves to the show, and they're helping to organize things on a local level. Um, and I'll list them off here quick. The first one is in Elbow. Elbow has a beautiful old elevator that they had a big community wide sort of preservation effort to keep this thing. A lot of these communities are the same. The next one's in Hepburn. They've turned their old elevator into the Museum of Wheat, and it's really well preserved. And there's one in Southie. And in Southie, it's actually an operating elevator. It used to be a wheat pool elevator, but it's a privately owned now. And the guy who runs it was really into the idea. And that one actually sold out like that. So we've actually added a second show in the Southie elevator, which is so bizarre.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then there's one in Riverhurst. They've got a beautiful old elevator. And then a really special one on July the 5th. We go down to Horizon, which is a ghost town. And the concert goers for that one ride the old heritage train from Ogama to Horizon for 20 kilometers across the prairie, and they arrive at the elevator, and they come into the elevator for the concert, arriving in a 1925 Pullman coach. Like it's a really crazy sort of thing, right? But it's also sold like hotcakes. Like it's quite astounding. And then the last couple are in Gravelburg, and then near Musha at the Sukin and Ship Pioneer Village, where they've preserved an elevator too. And yeah, it's an idea that's really caught people's attention because I think not only is it a record launch, it kind of involves there's a heritage angle to it, and
Mhm.
there's a rural subplot to the whole thing too. And typically I would just launch a record with a show in a theater and like that's that. But this is just sort of a it's kind of a grander silly idea, and it's kind of fun.
I think it's the experience. How many people are going to be able to say that they've gone to a concert at a grain elevator in rural Saskatchewan?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it's gonna be really cool. The one at Horizon, I think will be awesome. I've been there to that grain elevator and through that little town, and I often wonder what wind is going to knock that thing over because it's like it looks pretty.
No, that elevator was built in 1922, and it was
Oh,
I was actually I just shot a music video down there in that elevator. Actually, the video is not done or out yet, but like I got to know it quite well through the course of the day, and I mean, although it looks like the wind will blow it over, once you're in it, like it is so sturdy. Like there's a second elevator in Horizon. It's an old pool elevator. That one looks like it's gonna fall down. But yeah, this all some of the like the one in Punashai. Going back to the song, it was like when they got the backhoe thing up against it, beating against it to try to knock it over. They really couldn't knock it over. Like it was built so well.
those things are sturdy.
Yeah.
They knew how to build things 100 years ago, which is
Oh
why they're
yeah.
still standing today.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
some maybe look like they're going to fall over in a good stiff wind, but they're had I tried to build it, totally different story.
Exactly. It's not an IKEA kit. Exactly.
No, that's right. Exactly. So if a person wants tickets for this, any of these shows, or more than one, if they want to kind of follow you along,
Yeah.
and in particular the one that goes to Horizon, how do they track down ticket sales or ticket information?
So there's some pretty obvious ticket links and ticket places on my website. That's probably the easiest to do, and that's jeffstraker.com. Once you get to that website, it's pretty obvious where the tickets are located. So yeah, if anybody wants to come, the more the merrier. Just like the warning is that a few of these, one of them is sold out already. We've added a second night in Saudi, and it's already selling fast. And the train only has like 10 seats left or something. So some of these are selling really quickly.
I think the train one, that'll be a really cool experience. I haven't been on the train tour, but I think that's kind of cool. And then when you kind of connect it with an event like this, I think that's just kind of like the icing on the cake. And I think people are going to really, really truly enjoy that experience. That's really cool.
And there's cocktails on the train.
Oh,
Let's be clear.
that's why it's selling so well. Oh, wow. Well, Jeffrey, I'll let you run. I know you're a busy guy getting ready for this and putting the video together and going to play that 1910 piano behind you. I do appreciate you taking the time today. And good luck at the SCMAs in a couple of weeks. And good luck with this tour. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for the chat. I really appreciate it.